Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Grace Apostolic's 5th week of Summer in the Epistles. This week we are covering the book of Galatians. Key verses is Galatians chapter 2, verses 20 and 21, which state, I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not frustrate the grace of God, for if righteousness come by the law, then Christ is dead in vain. And chapter 5, verse 1 says, Stand fast therefore in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Paul writes Galatians, and in this forceful epistle, he urges the churches to do away with the false gospel of works and demonstrate the justification by faith. And he provides guidance for how we can experience this ongoing freedom of being God's children and the freedom that Christ has won for us. Galatians is broken down into 3 directions. Chapter 1 and 2 defends the gospel of grace. Chapter 3 and 4 explains the gospel of grace. And chapter 5 and 6 applies the gospel of grace. The gospel of grace defended, Paul starts right off at the beginning of the chapter and clarifies why he is writing and how he got to be in this position. God changed him. God picked him to preach and teach this gospel to all. Although Paul was independent in terms of his revelation, he was identical in content. The logic of this gospel, God has saved you not because of the good things that you have done for him, nor is it God has saved you through his mercy, now it's your turn to do something for him. Instead, it's God's love for you is so great that he is not going to be satisfied until you are wholly and completely the person you were created to be, utterly free to enjoy the love and peace and all else that it comes through the communion with him. God's transformation of believers flows out of his love for us. He has given us his spirit to render us renewed, whole, and righteous as we were meant to be. Our obedient choice to walk by the Spirit is simply a choice to receive this divine love and experience it to the fullest. The gospel of grace explained in chapters 3 and 4. Galatians begins by faith, and their growth in Christ must continue to be by faith. Christ was redeemed to all who trust in him from the curse of the law. The law was given to drive men to faith, not to save them. Believers in Christ are adopted sons of God and are no longer bound by this law. What the Spirit-led freedom and divine sonship looks like and how it is significantly different than the modern day freedom. I get to do whatever I want is not freedom, but it is slavery. Submitting to our selfish desires brings us loneliness, shame, and despair. True freedom involves the choice to forego what one naturally desires and to joyfully serve others out of love. Nowhere is this freedom seen more clearly than in the person of Jesus Christ, who, though he was in the form of God, he emptied himself by taking on the form of a servant. We live free as Christ is formed in us. The gospel of grace applied, as in chapters 5 and 6 declare, it talks about the liberty of living for God and warns the church to not go back to the bondage where they were delivered from. It talks about the conflict between the spirit and the flesh, tells us what the works of the flesh are and what the fruits of the spirit are. Chapter 6 teaches the church how to be a church and support one another, encourages us to not be weary in well-doing. I encourage you to read this book this week and ask God to reveal to you the areas to work on and to grow. We must never be content in our spiritual position. We must strive to be more like Jesus every day. Thank you for your time, and God bless you. Have a wonderful week.